Hi, how are you doing? Go ahead and sit back, wash your hands, grab something to drink. Let's dig in. I'm Carlos. This is Scarlet and Sable. This is the third scintillating part in the Land Raider build. I am applying metallic paint to the model in a down up direction. Okay, we'll leave that alone. So I'm going to be doing gunmetal. I'm going to be doing a single highlight. As I'm going around the miniature, you'll see that I'm not going to be doing too much brushwork. I'm only going to be doing exactly the amount that I need to cover all of the blue, and I may apply a highlight or I may not. One of the things about the pre-shading and all the work that we've done, we don't really need to do a lot to emphasize the other parts of the model. I know that when I read some books of some people, I start to think, after having dabbled in commission painting and trying to get things ready for these videos, how you come to view your time, especially if you're doing it for no profit or for whatever reason. You start to view what is the cost benefit, or what's worthwhile and what isn't, which is to say, like, how do you want to spend your time, how do you want to paint, how do you want to do minis, how do you want to do it. So when I'm doing this, those are what's going on in my mind. And when you're doing a larger model, you have to be, in my opinion, you have to be slightly more economical with how you choose to attack each portion of the model. And I think that if we stick to our main thesis of maximum contrast, we can achieve that with one good dark base coat, a bright highlight, which I think I go over it with pure silver, and then we can sort of add in all of our details, all of our nuance with our weathering, be it rust, be it oil washes, be it whatever. So the pin wash is going to draw out some detail. Now, a pin wash is not going to work on something that's extremely dark like the gunmetal, but it will tend to show up more on a lighter metallic. I have to be honest, like, I love metallics when I first started, but I have gotten away from using them. And typically on armor, at least on, if you were doing like a realistic vehicle or some sort of vehicle that was simulating, World War II or even a modern vehicle, you're not going to see a ton of metallic on it. You might have a machine gun, you might have like some tracks that are worn, but usually we would represent that with some graphite. And now, now that I'm thinking about it, you could probably swing it on this grill, just paint it like a dark brown, dark black, dark gray, and then rub your finger on it with, whatever graphite you're going to use. In this case, I did metallic. And I guess when I started saying is that I'm not as familiar, with their usage. So like in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to go for that bright contrast, and I'm going to hit it with black, and then I'm going to come back over it with silver, but that's kind of where I leave it. I don't necessarily add in inks and things like that because, it's a fine line. It's a balance, and really I think that, without sounding too pretentious, like I'm trying to find my style. And there's when I started doing, I believe, my ultramarine, I wanted to find an intersection between the weathering vehicle style, the mini painting style, and maybe, my style. So I wanted to find all of those things in the center of that. And there's definitely ways to successfully integrate all of those types of methods, and sometimes I think I succeed more than others, but that's how I approach it. So I think with the base coat, I definitely used a lot of technique, and I think that's, like, to me, that's the star. Like, that's the, if you want to get, kind of I'm not sure, artistic on it, like, that's the protagonist of this particular model. Like, the story is going to occur for me, all along the blue armor. So the blue armor is, in my opinion, the emphasis. Now I do show a little bit of painting the driver, not the driver, the gunner or the turret gunner. I do just a tiny amount of chipping to him. But in general, the blue is going to be where the story is told. So just a quick note on the brush and the dilution of the Vallejo metal color. It's a very good paint. I love it. It's kind of one of the only metallics I really have kicking around anymore because it's really the only one that I kind of liked. I have been looking into getting some Gaia Notes metallics, but that would be another... That's going to have to wait. So until then, this is what I'm using. I haven't seen like the quality of finish that you might see with like with a lacquer based metallic, but I think it's fine. And as long as you don't worry too much about it, it should be fine. So the paint itself, you can brush it on. It's meant for airbrushing. It's extremely thin. It's extremely low viscosity, so it flows everywhere. So you have to be careful when you're applying it. If your brush is soaked and you put it on the model, it's not gonna like run to the edge and then bead like a normal acrylic would. It's gonna run to the edge and probably spill over and slide down in all kinds of weird areas you weren't expecting. And I'm sure that happens at least several times while I'm doing this. So the only place that you really want to be careful, the fingerprints, right? We had the fingerprints in the first act that I was alluding to, and this is definitely where a lot of them occur. And I guess the only way to avoid that would have been to either leave it on the pedestal that I have it on right now, or to carefully inspect my hands every single time I was going to pick the model up. And while I'm painting, like I just don't do that. Like I'm not, I have so much on my mind, or at least I have a very singular purpose. So when I pick the model up, like I'd probably pick it up before I even think about it. It's like the whole coronavirus thing. You're not supposed to touch your face, right? Well, I'm grabbing this model before I even realize that there's paint. Well, you can see I'm painting onto my fingers, but you'll see as I go through, more paint ends up on the model. So there's definitely a better way to do it. I'm not going to say that it couldn't be done. I'm still finding it. So I think, I don't know if I got the red on camera. The red was done exactly the same way as the blue, except the colors are different, right? But I'm doing the same thing. So I had the black and white base laid down, and then I layered up some red over it, and then it looks like I might have put in maybe a little bit of blue towards the back edge, so it's kind of got that purplish tinge, and then towards the front end I use a little bit of orange. Nothing special, but it would definitely, when it, I feel like it's going to match the blue. And since it's kind of a larger segment, you need it to have some coherency with the blue. I don't think I succeeded as well on the pontoons with the blue, so they do kind of stand out a little bit. I think the next time around, or if I was doing this again, and it was, if I had one of these to paint, I'd probably just attach the pontoons to begin with and leave it at that, because having them separate didn't really make anything that much easier, except for, why was I thinking that? I think the only thing I could have been possibly thinking is maybe some of the airbrushing, but really it wouldn't have mattered, and it would have been better for overall coherency if I just left them all in the miniature. So, that's... I think a lot of times you have to paint something a few times before you realize the way you want to paint it, because when I was doing armor, like smaller armor, like 172, I would always leave the tracks off, because on larger vehicles you always leave the tracks off, and this is a bigger vehicle, and the scale for Warhammer is, I believe, 1/54th, and so that would mean that this tank is actually huge, because this is bigger than most 1/35th tanks you'll paint. By far. It's just this huge brick of a tank. And so if you thought about it in scale terms, it's even huger than that. It's bigger than, even, like, it'd be 2 to 3 times as big as like a 1/35th tank. And on those, you always take the tracks off. This model, you can't really build it without the tracks. I mean, you could, but it look weird. So it's part of figuring out how to paint a model. Now, if you have vast experience, or you just kind of naturally take to that stuff, then you probably get it the first time. But for me, like, I'd probably have to paint something 2 or 3 times before I really figured out the right way to paint it, so to speak, for my style. And for me, I would have attached the pontoons to begin with, and live and learn. So I think what I'm doing here is I'm kind of dry brushing. I'm bringing those elements together, because I'd painted the center of the grills pure silver, and all around the edges it was more gunmetal. So what I'm doing here is I'm just trying to tie everything together. Same thing on the front. Yeah. And throughout, I don't know if I catch it on camera, I paint the eagle just with Vallejo middle color gold. I didn't do any highlighting at all. I was counting on my pin washes to sort of activate those sections. And some of the sections that I don't paint, I just didn't paint because, oh, hold on a moment on this. The teal, the ultramarine blue, and the white. Those are the key colors for the base. Now, this is actually a pretty important part of the overall technique. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mix. I start with white. I'm going to add a little bit of blue, and I'm going to add a little bit of teal. What I'm trying to do is create my highlight color for all of my little details, all of my little rivets, all of my teeny weeny little panels, and then I'm going to highlight them, just like you would do an edge highlight, sort of. And you can edge highlight, but I prefer to catch like those little elements, because number one, it's not going to be nearly as time consuming as highlighting every edge, and number two, I was trying to straddle that line again, that fine line between the heavy metal style, the figure painting style, and something that would kind of have a nice armory weathered feel. One thing about the water, that bottle of water actually has a little bit of glycerin in it. The properties that glycerin gives to the water is that it acts as a retarder. I have about 10% glycerin in there. It's a 56 milliliter bottle. There's 54 milliliters of water and 6 milliliters of glycerin. I don't really ever shake it up, and it seems to work the same. So I think once you put the glycerin in, you don't really need to change it. So it's a pretty cheap way of doing it. The glycerin, at least I get mine at Walmart. It's 99.9% vegetable glycerin. It's food safe. Not that we're gonna put it in our mouths, but it's high quality stuff. Basically, it's like, if food grade is the highest grade of that material, I believe you can find. And the only thing I would advise is that I did 10%. I live in a pretty dry climate, but it's also tends to be a little colder. So I'd probably start. I might start with a smaller batch, and I might kind of adjust and see if I only needed about 5%, or if I needed. I wouldn't go over 10, but I would say less than 10 is probably better. Like me personally, I probably needed a little bit less than 6 milliliters of glycerin. So just bear that in mind if you decide to try it out. It's very inexpensive, and it's a pretty decent retarder that works with any water-based acrylic. The Golden High Flow doesn't necessarily need it, and once again, that's like, in retrospect, I'm like, yes, of course, but what can I say? I can't think of everything, right? On this thing, when I was talking earlier about the pre-shading in a previous episode, you can see all over the tank what I tried to do, and I think I executed on it. It's not to toot my own horn, but like, this is what I was going for. I want those dark areas around the rivets. I want those dark areas in the shadows. And you see when we highlight, there's a little Easter egg, little blend right there. When we highlight and when we paint those rivets, and we have that little kind of dark patch below it, or aurora or corona behind it, like that diffusion, right? That panel lining, that black and white layer, that extra little highlight layer that we did. You see how it's creating the depth in the model and creating that illusion. It's not really an illusion, since this does have panels that are separated from one another, but it actually enhances it. And if it didn't, it would also do the same thing. So that's really what we're doing, is we're just sort of like, we're punching up contrast, we're increasing the drama, we're doing all that stuff. And that's what I wanted to begin with. So I would say that at least on some level, I did succeed at that part. And that's really like, I'd say for that portion of it, that's when I talked about how the airbrushing work was going to do a lot of the work for us, you can see that it has. So I mean, I would say, you know, mission accomplished. And you could do the same thing by doing normal color modulation. Your outcome is going to be slightly different. So normal color modulation is pretty much the same as doing black and white, except you use color. So you're going to be using a dark green, a lighter green, adding a little yellow to that lighter green, and then adding a little white and yellow to the lighter green. And so you step up in the gradient to create your highlight on the miniature. And that's all that's about. And you know, what the purpose of that is that you're creating like this non regular finish, like it's got a lot of variety to it. Okay, so now I'm going to be painting the mechanicum bits. I left out the part where I painted the engine. Reason being, or the exhaust rather. Reason being is that I'm going to change that up. So it was just a mixture of black and red, and you know, I always knew that I was going to highlight it, but I couldn't quite make out how I was going to do it with the brush without it kind of looking super different from everything else. It'd have a different finish because I'm not going to be able to achieve that like ultra smooth blend with the brush that I can with the airbrush. Yeah, so I went back with different colors, and that's why I didn't cover it. In this, I'm just painting the mechanicum symbol. Very simple, very easy to do, just black. And nearly any color that's kind of close, even in the neighborhood of white, will look correct there. So you can mix up your own kind of like gray to light gray, and it'll do what you need it to do. The darker you start, the easier it'll be for you to highlight it if that's what you want to do. So just keep that in mind. You can, I mean, even tonalities of that, if you want to get real fancy, you can always add in different tonalities to that little symbol that include other stuff. And that's one of the interesting things to do. And one of the things that when I was watching Sergio Calvo paint, like in his non-metallic metal, he's adding in pink, he's adding in light blue, he's adding in greens. And at the final outcome, it just looks like a painted metal surface, and it's incredible to watch that guy paint. It's amazing. I mean, the thing is though, is like it's easy, it's fun, and then you're watching it like, yeah, I think I could do that, and you start doing it, and you're like, oh wait a second, okay, no, actually I can't. Step one of painting like Sergio Calvo: be Sergio Calvo. Anyhow, getting there. I know that I paint the other symbol on top of the turret gunner. I'm just waiting for that to appear. Same thing. Going to use whatever mix of colors that I happen to have nearby. As long as I'm using the same colors that I've used throughout the majority of the model, I can mix up any white and any dark color that I want, and it's going to look relatively correct. And it also, if I include some of those other colors into it, you know, it's going to add a little bit of harmony. On a large piece like this, not really a big deal, but on smaller pieces, it's certainly something to experiment with, trying to include those kind of harmonic colors. There's a really good tutorial I read once about it for, I believe, Kingdom Death, and I can't remember the name of the guy who painted it, but he was big on that. It was a very good PDF tutorial, one of the best that I've read. I don't really care for PDFs these days, but that was a very good one. Nutrient-filled PDF tutorial. So it looks like I'm still noodling on with this symbol, and yeah, I'm waiting for the next part. Alright, so it looks like we're going to be starting on the tracks. The color I have selected is the aptly named Track Primer from Vallejo model color Panzer Aces. It's pretty good color, neutral, brownish, kind of brownish gray. Not much to say about that color other than it's fine for this. That's not going to be the color that it ultimately ends up being, but if you painted it and you didn't necessarily do a lot of rusting, or maybe you just did like a wash of some dust, this is a great color to start with. And really, you don't need to buy an extra color. You just need to get like a dark brown, gray, reddish color. It's a great place to start from for any dark track color. Even like if you just had like a pot of GW Rhinox hide or something, just something that even that color track primer I think is very similar to Dryad bark. I think, don't quote me. I have bought a bunch of GW colors, but through the move and various other things, I've fallen off. I used to have ready access to it. I used to go to a store all the time that had, a bunch of it. I don't do that as much, and obviously for other reasons. I think that their pot system is ridiculous, among other things. So anyhow, let's not dwell on it. That color I pulled out, I believe, is dark rust. I don't know why, or no, maybe it's more track primer. I think it might be more track primer. Anyhow, this brush is a super cheap brush. It comes in a set of like 6. You can get it. I think we got these at Walmart, but I don't know. My wife picked up some brushes for me once. I bought some brushes. You spend about $6 or $7, and these brushes can really do a lot of the work for you. Believe it or not, the bristles themselves, as long as they can hold paint and lay it down, that's really all you need them to do. When you're doing highly detailed figures, you're going to want a sharp point on one of your brushes, but usually that's towards the end of your work. More and more, I'm like, man, I should have told my old self to just buy a couple of nice big flats, and I would have had a much better time. It's crazy when you think about the ideas. It's crazy when I think about the ideas that I had as a beginning painter. I was very strict. I was very, I've talked about it before, but I was completely, dogmatic about the recipes that I used. I needed to know everything down to the drop, to the milliliter. I tried to use a size 0 brush to paint everything. I mean, it was just, gosh, isn't youth, isn't it grand? Youth is wasted on the young. I wish I could go back in time and just slap myself. The thing about myself is that I know that I would not listen to myself. I continue to do my ridiculous, pointillism with my tiny little brush and try to paint a Land Raider by hand. Oh boy. Anyhow, there's really just a lot of base coating that's going to ensue. For some reason, I find it really satisfying to do this with a big brush with thick paint on the model. I don't know why. It's just very soothing to cover it like that. Yeah, okay. Enough about me. And you could mask it off. That's probably maybe a something that someone might think is like, why don't you just mask it? And yeah, I could have. I think the reason is that for me to mask it, it probably would have taken just as long to do it with a brush, and there's certainly a lot of enjoyment and tactile pleasure to painting the model with the brush, as opposed to just hitting everything with the airbrush. So it looks like at this point I've already painted the headlights and I've painted the eagle. I believe I painted little crucifixes on the side. I think I hit those with silver. That's all done for the sake of brevity. The lights, I believe I just used like a simple gradient of yellow and maybe like a yellowish orange. So not too much to say about that. I'm finishing up here. I'm going to hit some of the harder to reach places. I'm going to pull out my dreaded #1 Kolinsky and hit those areas. And I think that's... Oh, I'm also going to paint the turret gunner. So we have that to look forward to. Alright, so here we have the turret gunner. You can see I've already started chipping the front. I'm going to probably chip the other sides in a similar way. And I even did a little bit of weathering, but towards the middle when I laid down a gloss coat over the model, kind of made the rust look a little weird, and I don't know if I ever went back and fixed it. But I just needed a little bit of a break from the model itself. I mean, it was... I just wanted to get to the weathering, so I was like, trying to expedite this guy. But I think he came out fine, and if I hadn't glossed him, he probably would have been extra fine. But then I hit it with a little bit of flat, so it all worked out in the end. All the little details on the turret and stuff, I think I just painted it with like whatever was on the palette, so nothing too special there. I do a teeny weeny bit of chipping. I don't do anything major. I think I just hit some edges with some gray paint, and he didn't ask for much. He didn't need much, He was good to go. And that's getting back to the original kind of thread that I was pursuing in this video. There is definitely like you don't want to make something some of the smaller features of the model like the star of the show, like I didn't want to. I wanted the model itself to be the showpiece. Now if I just kind of put a turd on top of it and didn't do anything with this guy, that wouldn't work either. So I believe that there's a fine balance to all this stuff. And one of the lessons I mentioned at the beginning, and I'll mention it again, is that I think it's good every so often to have a look around the model, kind of check out what's going on with everybody, and adjust everything, and try to keep everything in track with one another, or on track with one another. So if and I've definitely done this before, where I'm like painting maybe a small miniature, or I'm painting a tank, and I just go crazy on one particular panel, and then I'm like, wait a second, I'm going to have to do that how many more times? And you sink 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 hours on just like a fender, and then you think about what you did and trying to recreate it and having to do that all over the model, and it starts to get a little bit intimidating. So I think that particular way of painting, you'll definitely know if it's for you. I don't think it's for me, because I fall into those traps all the time, and I get obsessed over one small part. And not to get sidetracked, wait a second, I always get sidetracked. But I mean, I see that a lot, and I see that people are focusing on teeny weeny little things on the model, and those are cool. Like, it's really nice to do an intricate, tiny little freehand. I think I just painted a tattoo on somebody recently. But it's more about, to me, lately, I want to finish models. I want the whole piece to kind of work together, and I want the piece as a whole to speak for itself. So I wouldn't say I'm there, but it's where I want to go. That's the destination on my horizon, is trying to keep everything in the model in harmony. All right, well, that's gonna do it. I'm glad that you guys stopped in again. I appreciate all the people that we've had. I didn't mention it, but I have reached 2,000K subscribers. I can't believe it. Or no, not 2,000K, 2K. 2,000K would be a lot. No, I'm at 2K subscribers somehow. I have no idea. It kind of made me think, like, man, a lot of people are going to be watching these, or at least some people have. So I need to start, if I'm going to keep the channel going, I need to take things a bit more seriously. So anyhow, I appreciate you guys. I'm glad that you stopped in. And if you have any suggestions, or you want to see the videos go in a different direction, feel free to comment. If you think I ramble too much, go ahead and tell me that too. Anyhow, I'll see you guys in the next one, and yeah, stay safe out there.